When my son called, sobbing that he might never walk again, I emptied my savings and borrowed against my home to save him. But months later I discovered the cruel truth. There had been no accident. The morning had started quiet the way I like it. I'd brewed myself a pot of coffee and set a slice of toast on a small plate. The house creaked in its usual way, the sound of pipes settling, the ticking of the old clock above the stove. I'd been thinking about whether I might get out to the garden later, if my knees allowed it. Just an ordinary morning. Then the phone rang. It startled me so much I nearly dropped my cup. Hardly anyone calls me at that hour. I wiped my hand on the dish towel and reached for the receiver, squinting at the caller ID. My heart skipped when I saw his name, my son. I smiled even before answering. Hello? Sweetheart? What came back was not the usual hurried greeting, not the distracted voice I was used to. No, this was different. His voice was shaking, breathless, strained. Mom, he said. Something's happened. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean happened? Are you all right? There was a pause, just the faint sound of him breathing unevenly. Then he spoke again, lower this time. I've been in a car accident. My chest clenched so fast I thought the air had been knocked out of me. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping against the linoleum. A car accident? Oh Lord. Where are you? Are you in the hospital? Are you hurt badly? It's bad, Mom, he said, his words tumbling, almost frantic. The doctors say I'll need a long rehabilitation. Therapy, special treatments. Without it, his voice broke. Without it, I might not walk again. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead, trying to picture him. My little boy, the one I'd once carried on my hip, the one who scraped his knees and came running for a kiss to make it better. Now all I could see was him broken and helpless in some hospital bed. Don't say that, I whispered. Don't you dare say you won't walk again. You will. We'll do whatever it takes. I don't know what else to do, he said. His breathing was ragged, full of despair. Mom, I need your help. Of course you do, I said quickly, because that much was true. Tell me what you need. Tell me right now. He hesitated. I could hear voices in the background, maybe a hallway, maybe machines beeping. Then his words came in a rush. $250,000. I blinked. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. What? That's what they say it'll cost. The treatments, the specialists, the rehab center. Insurance won't cover most of it. I've asked around, no one else can help. Mom, I'm desperate. The number echoed in my ears. $250,000. My knees nearly gave out, and I had to steady myself against the counter. That's more than I've ever. I know. He cut me off, his voice tight, almost pleading. I know it's a lot. But if I don't get this care, I don't have a chance. Please, Mom. Please. You're the only one I can turn to. I tried to catch my breath. The walls of the kitchen seemed to press in closer, the lace curtains blurring in my vision. My mind tumbled through questions. How would I ever raise that much? How soon did he need it? Was he truly as close to losing everything as he sounded? But his voice. Oh, his voice. It was the sound of a wounded child, my child, calling out. You don't understand, he said, almost whispering now. I can't face life in a wheelchair. I can't. Please, Mom, I need you. I need this money, or I don't know what will happen to me. I opened my mouth, closed it again. I wanted to ask him details, wanted to know exactly where he was, what hospital, what doctors. But the fear in him swallowed up my questions. The way he said, I need you, pulled at something so deep inside me I couldn't think straight. 250,000, I repeated slowly, barely able to believe the words on my own tongue. Yes, he said quickly, seizing on my voice like a lifeline. Yes, Mom. If I have that, I can get into the program. They'll start treatment right away. I'll have a chance. My hand shook against the counter, my thumb rubbing over the cool cord of the phone. I could hear him breathing, waiting, desperate. "You're all I have," he said again, his voice breaking. "If you can do this, if you can find a way, I swear I'll pay you back. Every cent. But right now it's my only hope." I felt my throat tighten, the words clawing their way up. "All right," I whispered. "I'll see what I can do." His sigh on the other end was sharp, relieved, almost like a sob. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. I don't know what I'd do without you. Just promise me you're safe tonight," I said, my voice thin. "Promise me you'll let the doctors take care of you until I figure things out." "I promise," he said. "And Mom, I love you." Then just like that, the line went quiet. I stood there, still holding the receiver long after the call had ended, listening to nothing at all. After I set the phone down, I stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours, though the clock told me it was only minutes. My hands still trembled, the sound of his pleading voice ringing in my ears. $250,000. It seemed impossible, but I'd already said I would help him. And when a mother makes a promise to her child, she keeps it. That night I hardly slept. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, counting in my head every place I had money set aside. The savings account, the little pile of government bonds tucked away in a tin box, the certificates of deposit I'd sworn I wouldn't touch until the day I died. Even my retirement fund, the nest egg I'd built little by little, week after week, through years of work and sacrifice. All of it suddenly felt like it was sitting on a scale, and on the other side was my son's future. By morning I had made up my mind. I would gather the money. All of it. I started with the bonds. I'd bought them back when my husband was alive, when we were both younger and more hopeful about retirement. He used to say, "These will be our safety net." Well, I told myself this was a fall and safety nets are meant to catch us. I went to the bank and asked to cash them in. The clerk, a young woman with polished nails and a bright smile, looked at me like I was strange. "Are you sure you want to redeem these, ma'am? They've got years of interest left." "Yes," I said firmly, though my voice cracked. "I need the money now." She nodded, clicked her keyboard, and slid the papers across for me to sign. I signed them with a hand that shook only slightly. Next, I went into my savings. That part was easier, just numbers on a screen. Watching them vanish as I transferred funds was like pulling teeth, but I told myself it wasn't gone. It was in his hands now, helping him heal, helping him walk again. Still, when I tallied the total that evening, it wasn't enough. Not nearly. That's when I did something I swore I never would. I called the bank about a loan. The man on the phone asked all the usual questions. Did I have assets? Income? Collateral? I explained what I could, my voice growing smaller with each answer. "I have a house," I said finally, though my stomach twisted as the words left me. "Well," he said briskly, "that's something. We can consider a home equity line." I sat at my kitchen table, the receiver pressed to my ear, staring at the faded wallpaper that had been there since the children were small. The house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was birthdays and Christmas mornings. It was where I kissed scraped knees and sewed Halloween costumes. To think of it tied to debt felt like handing away the last piece of my life. But what choice did I have? By the end of that week, the paperwork was in motion. I had borrowed what I needed to make up the difference, signing form after form while the banker explained terms I barely understood. I kept nodding, though inside my mind was a blur. The only clear thought was my son's voice saying, "Please, Mom, you're all I have." When I left the bank, I sat in my car for a long while before turning the key. My reflection in the rearview mirror startled me. Lined face, weary eyes, hair gone silver long ago. I looked older than I felt, older than I wanted to be. But mothers don't get to stay young forever. We age in service of our children. At home, I pulled open the cedar box on my dresser. Inside was my jewelry. Nothing extravagant, just small tokens collected over a lifetime. A pearl necklace my husband had given me on our 10th anniversary, a modest diamond ring from my mother, a few brooches I'd worn to church. I carried them to the jeweler and laid them out on the glass counter. The man behind the counter examined each piece, tapping at his calculator. "I can give you $1,200 for the lot." $1,200. It was almost laughable compared to what I needed. Still I nodded. "Fine." He slipped them into a small bag, and I walked out with a check that felt both heavy and worthless in my purse. By the time the funds came together, I was exhausted. My body ached from the running around, my mind from the constant worry. I had moved money from every corner of my life, sold keepsakes, borrowed against my home. And still I told myself I hadn't lost anything, because what I was gaining, what he would gain, was worth more than all of it. When I finally called him back, my voice was soft but steady. "I have it," I said. There was a pause on the line, then a sharp breath of relief. "You do?" "Yes," I said, closing my eyes. 250,000. It took some doing, but it's ready. Tell me where to send it." His voice broke into gratitude, tumbling fast and full of promises. "Oh, Mom, you don't know what this means. I swear I'll pay you back. Every penny. You saved me. You saved my life." I didn't answer right away. My throat was too tight. I gripped the phone with both hands, the weight of it pressing into my palms. "Just tell me where it needs to go," I managed finally. And that was how I gave him everything I had. It had been 2 weeks since I wired the money to my son. 2 weeks of quiet worry, where I tried to imagine him in a rehabilitation center somewhere. Nurses wheeling him down bright hallways, doctors discussing his progress, physical therapists teaching him to walk again. That picture was the only thing that made the hole in my bank account feel bearable. I kept waiting for updates. A call, a text, a note. Anything. But silence stretched on. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. Every time it wasn't him, I felt the fall of disappointment. I told myself he must be tired or busy with therapy. Still the quiet gnawed at me. Then one morning, as I was rinsing dishes in the sink, the phone rang again. I dried my hands quickly on my apron and picked it up. "Hello. Good morning." A cheerful woman's voice sang on the other end. "Is this Mrs. Walters?" "Yes, speaking. This is Caroline from Ever After Weddings. I'm the planner working with your son." I froze. The dish towel slipped from my hands onto the counter. "I'm sorry, with my son?" "Yes," she said brightly, unaware of the ice crawling down my spine. "I'm helping organize his upcoming wedding, and he mentioned you were important to him. I just wanted to ask, did you have any ideas for a surprise we could arrange for the groom? Something sentimental?" I could not breathe. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. Wedding. The word stuck on my tongue, heavy and strange. "My son's wedding?" "Yes," she said again, kindly but with a touch of confusion. "I assumed you knew. The date is coming up soon. We're finalizing details. He spoke of you fondly, so I thought you might want to contribute something special." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knees trembling. "No," I whispered. "No, he didn't tell me anything. Nothing at all." There was a pause on the line, her cheerful tone dimming. Oh my goodness, I didn't mean to overstep. I just thought, well, usually the mother of the groom is involved. My throat burned, but no words came out. My son, the same one who had called me sobbing for money, pleading for help with rehabilitation, was not lying in a hospital bed at all. He was planning a wedding he had not even invited me to. The woman cleared her throat nervously. "I'm terribly sorry if I caused any confusion. Perhaps I should follow up directly with him about this." I forced myself to speak, though my voice cracked. Yes, you should." She thanked me politely and hung up, leaving me staring at the receiver in my hand like it had betrayed me. I set the phone down slowly, as if it were fragile glass, and sat at the kitchen table. My body felt drained of strength, as though the truth had hollowed me out in an instant. My son had not been in an accident. There was no rehabilitation. The money I had torn from every corner of my life had gone elsewhere, to flowers, tuxedos, a banquet hall, and a future that didn't have a place for me. I sat there for a long time, staring at the lace curtains fluttering in the draft. Outside, children laughed as they played in the street. A dog barked down the block. The world moved on, but I was pinned in place, stunned. When the tears finally came, they weren't soft. They were hot, bitter, shaking me until I had to cover my face with both hands. All the trust I'd clung to, all the sacrifices I'd made, twisted into humiliation. And still underneath the hurt, a question gnawed at me: why? Why had he not told me? Why would he lie so deeply, so cruelly to his own mother? I replayed the phone call from him, every word, every desperate plea. I could still hear the way his voice had cracked when he said, I might never walk again. It hadn't just been a lie. It had been a performance, crafted to pierce the deepest corners of my heart. The next day I tried calling him. Once, twice, 5 times. Each time the call went to voicemail. I left no messages. I didn't trust myself not to sound broken. But the silence told me enough. He wasn't going to explain. Not yet. That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, but not with worry this time. With shock. With a growing edge of anger beneath the sorrow. My son had deceived me, stolen from me, and left me out of the most important day of his life. And though I didn't know it yet, that phone call from the wedding planner was the moment everything began to unravel. I told myself I wouldn't go. Why should I? A son who lies about an accident, who drains his own mother of her savings, who doesn't even call to say, please come share this day with me. No, I told myself I'd stay home. I'd let the silence answer for me. But the morning of the wedding, I woke early. I opened the curtains and saw the sunlight spilling across the yard, warming the marigolds I had planted in spring. Something inside me hardened. My son might not want me there, but he was still my son. I had every right to see with my own eyes the life he was building, the life he thought I didn't deserve to be part of. So I put on my best dress, navy blue with small white flowers. I fastened the pearl necklace my husband had given me all those years ago. I tucked the invitation into my purse, not as proof I belonged, but as a shield. And then, with my hands trembling against the steering wheel, I drove to the church. The parking lot was full, cars lined up neatly in rows. I found a spot at the edge and sat for a moment, my heart hammering. People streamed toward the entrance, women in bright dresses, men in pressed suits. I recognized none of them. When I finally stepped inside, the air was thick with perfume and the murmur of voices. White ribbons lined the pews. Flowers spilled from tall vases near the altar. It was beautiful, I'll admit, the kind of wedding I might have dreamed of for him once. But then I saw him. My son, standing at the front, straight-backed and smiling. No crutches, no wheelchair, no trace of injury at all. Healthy. Whole. The sight punched the air from my lungs. For weeks I had imagined him broken, suffering, desperate for hope. And there he was, the picture of ease, dressed in a fine suit, laughing with his groomsmen. I felt myself sway, gripping the back of a pew to steady myself. I should have turned and walked right out, but I couldn't. My feet rooted to the floor. Then the music began, and the bride appeared. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. A long white gown trailed behind her, and her veil shimmered in the soft light. Everyone turned, smiling, craning their necks. Everyone except me. As she walked past, I caught sight of something that made my heart seize. My son leaned toward her and whispered something. She laughed, soft and bright, the sound carrying just enough for me to hear. And then, as they reached the front, the officiant spoke words that should have made me proud. But what happened next nearly broke me. When it came time for introductions, When the officiant spoke of family, my son gestured to a woman seated in the front row, a woman I had never seen before. He smiled at her with warmth, with gratitude, and then said words that struck like knives. "This is the woman who raised me." I felt my knees weaken. The pew seemed to tilt beneath my hand. The people around me clapped politely, smiling at this stranger as if she had truly been the one who rocked him to sleep, who patched his torn jeans, who saved every extra dollar for his school books. I stared at her composed smile, and for a moment I thought I might cry out right there in the church. But I didn't. I stood silently in the back, a ghost at my own son's wedding. The ceremony continued, vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers. Laughter, applause, music. I didn't hear half of it. My mind buzzed, replaying that one sentence again and again. The woman who raised me. When the final blessing was spoken and the guests rose to applaud, I slipped out quietly. No one noticed. Not a single face turned my way. Outside, the sun was blinding. The bells rang joyfully, but each peal felt hollow in my chest. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and unrelenting. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, my shoulders shaking. It wasn't just the lie about the accident anymore. It wasn't even the money, though that cut deep. It was something crueler, more deliberate, erasing me, replacing me, as though my years of sacrifice, my love, my care, none of it had ever existed. When I finally drove away, the laughter of the guests spilled out of the church behind me, carried on the wind. I gripped the wheel tight, forcing myself not to look back. I had seen what I needed to see. My son had not only lied to me, he had chosen to erase me. And though I didn't know how yet, I promised myself one thing on that drive home. I would not stay silent. The drive home from the wedding was a blur. I don't remember half the turns I took, or the stoplights I must have passed. My hands gripped the wheel until they ached, but my mind was elsewhere. Still in that church, still hearing his voice declare another woman as the one who raised him. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house looked the same as it always had. The roses in the garden leaned toward the sun. The curtains fluttered in the kitchen window. But stepping inside felt different. The quiet pressed down on me, and for the first time it wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. I set my purse on the table, the wedding invitation still tucked inside. I stared at it for a long while before pulling it out. The elegant script mocked me. "You are cordially invited." As if I had been wanted. As if my presence had ever mattered. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once helped him with his homework, where I'd bandaged his scrapes, where I'd cried quietly the night he first left home. And now here I was again, staring at a piece of paper that proved how far he had gone from me. The betrayal was almost too much to name. It wasn't only the money anymore. It wasn't just the lie about an accident. It was the way he had carved me out of his life entirely, replaced me with someone else, as if I were a placeholder to be discarded once he no longer needed me. I told myself I wouldn't call him. Not that night, not ever. But grief has a way of stirring desperation. By morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I picked up the phone and dialed. He answered on the third ring. "Mom," he said, cautious. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to steady. "I went to your wedding." There was a pause, sharp and heavy. You were there?" "Yes," I said. My hands trembled as I gripped the receiver. "I saw you. I heard you. I saw you point to someone else and call her the woman who raised you." He exhaled, a sound caught between irritation and disbelief. "Mom, it was just a speech. A way to honor someone important in my life. Don't take it so personally." "Not take it personally?" My voice rose despite myself. "You lied to me, told me you were broken and helpless, begged me for money. I sold bonds, I emptied my savings, I borrowed against my house. And all the while, you were planning a wedding I wasn't even invited to. And then you erased me right there in front of everyone." His silence on the line was worse than words. Finally, he said flatly, "Mom, you wouldn't have understood. You always make things complicated. I just wanted the day to be simple." Simple. The word stabbed deep. Simple meant a life where I wasn't welcome. "You took everything from me," I whispered. "And you couldn't even give me a seat at the table." He sighed as though I were a burden. "Look, I'll pay you back. You'll get your money. But please don't drag this out. I don't need the drama." Drama? My voice cracked. "You call your own mother's heartbreak drama?" "Mom," he said, his tone sharp now, "I can't do this right now. I'll call you later." And just like that, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my body shaking. The call hadn't brought the relief I had hoped for. Instead, it sharpened the truth. My son wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was dismissive, as if my pain were an inconvenience. I spent the next few days wandering the house, barely eating, barely sleeping. I would find myself standing in doorways, staring at old photographs. His kindergarten picture on the mantel, his graduation photo framed in the hallway. In each one I saw the boy I had loved, the boy I thought I was protecting with every sacrifice I ever made. But now I had to face it. That boy was gone. In his place was a man who looked at me not as a mother, not as a person to be cherished, but as a source to be tapped, a resource to be drained. The illusion I had carried, that no matter what, he would always love me, always honor me, shattered into pieces too sharp to gather. One night I pulled out my old journals. Page after page I had written about him, his first words, the way he loved peanut butter sandwiches cut diagonally, the time he cried when he lost his first baseball game. I traced the words with my finger, tears blurring my vision. How could that little boy become the man who lied to me so easily? It was then that something inside me began to shift. The heartbreak was still there, raw and consuming, but beneath it, a new feeling stirred. Something harder, steadier. Determination. If he thought he could use me, deceive me, and then cast me aside without consequence, he was wrong. I didn't know yet what I would do. But I knew one thing for certain. I would not let this betrayal be the end of my story. The days after that phone call stretched out long and heavy. I moved through the house like a shadow, cooking meals I barely touched, straightening shelves that didn't need straightening, folding laundry that could have waited. My mind was elsewhere, always circling back to the lies, the accident, the pleading voice, the borrowed money, and then the wedding where he stood tall and healthy, introducing a stranger as the woman who raised him. It didn't fit together. None of it did. And the more I turned it over, the more I realized I needed answers. Real answers, not half-truths tossed my way when it was convenient for him. That's when I thought of hiring a detective. It felt strange at first, even shameful, as though snooping on my own child was a betrayal. But hadn't he already betrayed me? Hadn't he stolen my trust, along with everything I had worked for? If I didn't look for the truth, who else would? So one afternoon I pulled the phone book from the drawer. Yes, the old phone book. I still keep one, though most folks these days laugh at the thought. My finger trailed down the thin columns until I found a name. Davis Investigations. I hesitated before dialing, my hand hovering over the numbers. Then I thought of the bonds I had cashed, the jewelry I had pawned, the loan papers with my house tied up in them. My resolve hardened. Davis Investigations, a brisk voice answered. Yes, I said, my voice trembling at first. I need someone to look into a matter for me. Family business. We arranged a meeting for the next day at a little coffee shop downtown. I almost backed out, but I forced myself to go. The man who walked in wasn't what I expected. He wasn't slick or flashy like in the detective stories on TV. He was plain, mid-50s, thinning hair, suit a little worn at the elbows. But his eyes were sharp, the kind that missed nothing. "Mrs. Walters?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. "Yes." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. Tell me what's going on. I hesitated, embarrassed by how pitiful it sounded when spoken aloud. My son told me he was in a terrible car accident. He said he needed money, $250,000 for rehabilitation. I gave it to him. Every cent I had. The detective's pen hovered above the page. Go on. I swallowed hard. Then, not 2 weeks later, I find out he wasn't in the hospital at all. He was planning a wedding. A wedding I wasn't even invited to. My voice cracked. I went. I saw him. He was fine. No injuries, no wheelchair. Nothing. For the first time since it all began, I felt the tears rise not from sorrow, but from sheer anger. I clenched my hands around my cup of cold coffee. I need to know the truth. Was there ever an accident? Or was it all a lie? The detective nodded slowly, jotting notes. You want confirmation. Paper trails, facts. Something solid. Yes, I whispered. I need proof. He closed the notebook and leaned back. Give me a week. The weight was unbearable. Each day felt like walking with stones in my pockets dragging me down. I tried to keep busy, baked a pie, tended the garden, but my mind never strayed far from the questions. Had my son really deceived me so completely? When the detective called, I nearly dropped the phone in my haste to answer. I have some information, he said. Can we meet? We met again at the coffee shop in the same booth. He laid a thin folder on the table. My heart pounded as he slid it toward me. There was no car accident, he said plainly. I felt the words hit me like a blow. What? He opened the folder. Inside were printed reports, photographs, official documents. No police reports, no tow records, no insurance claims. Nothing to indicate he was ever in an accident. I checked the hospitals too. No admissions under his name during that time. It was fabricated. My throat went dry. I looked down at the papers, the neat columns of text and dates that spelled out his lie in black and white. So it was all a story. Yes. His tone was gentle but firm. A deception. He used you. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to hold back the wave of nausea that rose in me. I had known deep down, but hearing it confirmed, it broke something. The detective's eyes softened. I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy, but at least now you know. I nodded numbly, my hand trembling as I flipped through the papers. No accident. No rehabilitation. No desperate need. Just a son who looked his mother in the eye, or rather through the phone line, and lied without hesitation. As I closed the folder, a strange calm settled over me. The heartbreak was still there, but now it had something to cling to. Evidence. Proof. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. He had done this to me. The detective slid his card across the table. If you need me to dig deeper, I can. I slipped it into my purse. Thank you, I whispered. When I walked out into the sunlight, I held the folder tight against my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. The truth was ugly, but it was mine now. And I knew this was only the beginning. I thought the truth about the accident would be the hardest blow. That once I accepted there had never been a crash, never any rehabilitation, I could begin to patch the pieces of my heart back together. But I was wrong. That was only the surface. The real wound was deeper. After our last meeting, I had taken the folder home, laid it out on my kitchen table, and read every page until my eyes ached. No police reports, no hospital records, no insurance claims. My son had fabricated it all. I told myself that was enough, that I didn't need to know more. But late at night, when the house was too quiet, another thought gnawed at me. If he lied so easily about this, what else has he lied about? It was that thought that led me to call the detective again. My voice trembled as I left the message. Mr. Davis, I need you to look further. Don't stop at the accident. Look at everything. His finances. His connections. Whatever you can find. We met again a week later. This time when he slid the folder across the table, his face carried a heaviness that told me before he even spoke. There was more. I need you to brace yourself, Mrs. Walters, he said gently. What I've found isn't just about the accident. It goes beyond that. I nodded, my hands clenched in my lap. Tell me. He opened the folder. I ran a check on your son's financial activity. For the last 6 months there's been a pattern: regular withdrawals, small amounts at first but consistent. All from accounts tied to your name. I frowned. My accounts? Yes. He slid a statement toward me. My name was at the top, bold and undeniable. Below it, a series of withdrawals. Not enormous sums, but steady, 200 here, 500 there. Always just low enough not to raise alarms. My heart thudded painfully. But how? I never authorized this. He tapped the page. He had access. Electronic transfers, linked cards. He must have set it up gradually, quietly. By the time you noticed, it would have looked like routine expenses. I stared at the page, the numbers blurring. All those times I'd wondered why my balance seemed lighter than it should have been, blaming it on rising bills or groceries costing more. All the while my own son had been bleeding me dry. Mr. Davis went on. It's not just money. I spoke to people who know him, colleagues, acquaintances. There's a trail of deception. Borrowing money he never repaid. Making promises he never kept. Using your name, your reputation as leverage. The words hit like hammer blows. Each one drove home a truth I hadn't wanted to face. This wasn't a one-time mistake, a desperate plea gone too far. It was a pattern. A life built on lies. I pressed my fingers to my temples, fighting the wave of nausea rising in me. So it wasn't just the 250,000. It's been going on for months. Maybe years. Yes, he said quietly. I'm afraid so. The tears came then, not soft but harsh, stinging. I thought of all the times I'd defended him, all the times I'd told friends he's doing his best. He just needs a little help right now. I thought of the sacrifices I had made, the quiet meals alone so I could save more, the little luxuries I denied myself. And all the while he had been dipping into my life, pulling it apart thread by thread. When I finally looked up, my voice shook, but there was steel beneath it. Thank you for finding this. I needed to know. He gave me a nod, sliding the rest of the folder toward me. Keep these. If you decide to take action, you'll need them. I carried that folder home like it was a burden and a weapon all at once. I laid the papers out again on the table, my kitchen light flickering over them. Bank statements, testimonies, notes in Mr. Davis's neat handwriting. Proof. Evidence. Each page was another betrayal, another cut. But together they formed something undeniable. A map of deceit. That night I didn't cry. Not anymore. I sat at the table with a cup of tea gone cold and stared at the evidence until dawn began to creep through the curtains. By then my grief had shifted into something sharper. He hadn't just lied once. He hadn't just taken in a moment of desperation. He had been stealing from me, betraying me for months. Maybe longer. And if I let it continue, if I stayed silent, he would only do worse. I folded the papers carefully back into the folder, pressing it shut with both hands. My decision was made. I would no longer beg for honesty. I would no longer wait for apologies that would never come. I would gather every scrap of proof, and I would take it to the only place left where truth mattered. The courtroom. The folder from Mr. Davis sat in the center of my kitchen table like a silent guest. Every time I walked past it, my stomach twisted. Inside were the papers that proved what I'd been afraid to admit aloud. My son hadn't stumbled once, hadn't made a single terrible mistake. He had been living off lies for months, draining me bit by bit, until finally he bled me dry with his grandest deception, the accident that never was. I thought I would collapse under the weight of that truth. But instead, something inside me began to rise. A quiet determination, as though all the years of cooking meals, mending torn jeans, stretching paychecks, and keeping a home had been practice for this moment. I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. If he thought he could outwit me, he had forgotten who I was. I was his mother, the one who had learned to stretch a single chicken into 3 dinners, who had paid bills on time when there was hardly a dime to spare, who had survived grief and loneliness and still managed to stand. I wasn't about to let him take everything and walk away smiling. So I got to work. First, I spread the papers across the table in neat rows. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, notes from the detective. Each page was another nail in the coffin of his lies. I pulled out a notebook of my own and began to copy dates, amounts, times. At first, my hand shook, but soon I found a rhythm, as though I were balancing a household ledger again. I called the bank and requested copies of my account history for the past year. The clerk on the phone was polite, almost cheerful, unaware that with every keystroke she was helping a mother build a case against her son. When the thick envelope arrived a week later, I sat down with my reading glasses and traced every line. My heart lurched each time I saw the withdrawals, always small enough to escape suspicion, always spaced just far apart to look like routine spending. But when I added them all together, the total was staggering. Thousands upon thousands, siphoned away like water leaking through a crack in the roof. I clipped the statements together and labeled them with a sticky note: unauthorized withdrawals. Next came the jewelry. I returned to the pawnshop where I'd sold my pearl necklace and diamond ring, the ones I'd handed over in desperation when I thought I was saving his life. The man behind the counter blinked in surprise when I asked for receipts. "Planning on buying them back?" he asked. "No," I said firmly. "I just need proof." He shrugged and printed out copies. I slipped them into the folder, my fingers brushing the paper as though it might burn. Proof of how far I'd gone for him, and how carelessly he had thrown me aside. I began keeping a little journal too. I wrote down every phone call, every memory, every detail I could recall. The night he had called me, his voice trembling as he told me he might never walk again. The exact words he'd used. The way he had begged. I wrote it all down, page after page, until my hand cramped. At night, when the house was still, I would sit with those papers and reread them. Not to torture myself, but to remind myself. I was not imagining this. I had been deceived, yes, but I wasn't powerless. The truth was on my side now. Mr. Davis continued to help, digging up more small details. A payment he'd made to the wedding planner just days after I sent him the money. A rental for a luxury car, billed in his name. Little things, but together they painted a clear picture. He hadn't spent a dime on doctors or therapy. He had funneled it all into a celebration where I wasn't even welcome. Each time Davis handed me something new, I slipped it into a binder I'd bought at the office supply store. I organized it carefully, financial records in one section, personal notes in another, receipts and testimonies in a third. By the time I was done, the binder was thick, heavy in my hands. I remember closing it one night and pressing it against my chest. "You thought I was weak," I whispered into the quiet. "But you forgot. Mothers don't forget. Mothers keep records." The hardest part, though, wasn't the numbers or the papers. It was the photographs. I dug through boxes in the closet, pulling out pictures of him at every stage of life. My son with cake smeared on his face at his 5th birthday. My son in his little league uniform, grinning proudly with a bat too big for him. My son at graduation, taller than me now but still my boy. I wanted to rip them up, to throw them away. But instead I slipped a few into the binder too. Not because they were evidence of crime, but because they were evidence of betrayal. A reminder of who I had raised, and who he had chosen to become. By the end of that month my binder was ready. Each page a stone in the foundation of a case I never thought I'd have to build against my own child. I sat at the kitchen table, the binder in front of me, my hands folded neatly on top. My heart hurt, but my mind was clear. The next step was no longer gathering. It was acting. It was time to take these pages to someone who could wield them like the weapon they were meant to be. A lawyer. Walking into a lawyer's office with a binder full of evidence against your own son is a kind of heartbreak I wouldn't wish on anyone. My knees trembled as I climbed the stairs, my hands clutching that binder so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt like I was carrying not just paper, but the weight of every memory I had of him. The first cries, the scraped knees, the proud smile when he got his first job. And now all of it was stained. The lawyer's name was Margaret Collins. A friend from church had recommended her. She doesn't back down, they'd said. That was exactly what I needed. Her office was tidy, bookshelves lined with volumes of law, diplomas neatly framed on the wall. She greeted me warmly but with a professional air. The kind of woman who could shake your hand and make you feel both safe and understood. "What brings you in today, Mrs. Walters?" she asked, settling across from me. I opened the binder and slid it toward her. My voice shook. "My son. He deceived me. He took $250,000 under false pretenses. And that's only part of it." She arched an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. She leafed through the pages, bank statements, receipts, the detective's reports, my own notes written in careful script. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of papers turning. Finally she looked up. "You've done half my job for me," she said. "This is thorough, compelling. If everything here checks out, you have a strong case." My throat tightened. "So you think I can get it back?" "Yes," she said firmly. "We can file a civil suit for fraud and misrepresentation. It won't be quick, and it won't be painless, but the evidence is in your favor." Her words should have brought relief. Instead, I felt the sting of tears. Taking your own child to court, it's the kind of thing you read in newspapers, shake your head at, never imagining it could be you. But here I was. We filed the case. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, depositions, and long nights staring at the ceiling. My son avoided me completely. When he was served, he called once, not to apologize but to rage. "How dare you drag me into court, Mom?" he shouted down the line. "You're going to ruin me." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." And then I hung up. The trial came months later. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Margaret beside me, my binder now an exhibit, my pain reduced to evidence. Across the aisle, my son sat with his lawyer. He didn't look at me. Not once. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My knees wobbled, but I stood tall. The arguments began. Margaret was steady, precise, laying out the timeline like clockwork. She showed the withdrawals, the lies about the accident, the sudden payments for wedding expenses. Piece by piece, she built the story until even the courtroom seemed to lean toward the truth. Then came his defense. His lawyer tried to paint him as desperate, overwhelmed, a man who had made poor choices but meant no harm. I clenched my hands in my lap as they twisted the story, making me sound like a wealthy woman who wouldn't miss the money, as if my sacrifice had been casual. At last the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Walters, would you like to speak?" I rose slowly, my legs trembling but my heart steady. "Your Honor," I began, my voice soft but carrying. "I am not here because of greed. I am not here because I can't bear to lose money. I am here because my son looked me in the eye and lied. He told me he was broken, that he might never walk again, that he needed me to save him. I gave him everything I had, not for riches, not for comfort, but because I am his mother. And he spent it on a wedding I wasn't even invited to." The courtroom was silent. I could feel the sting of tears in my eyes, but I kept going. This isn't about dollars and cents. This is about truth. About trust. About a betrayal so deep it could bury a mother whole. I refuse to be buried. I am here for justice. When I sat back down, Margaret squeezed my hand. Across the room, my son stared at the floor. The deliberation didn't take long. The judge's voice was clear, final. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to repay the sum of $250,000 in full. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Relief washed over me, but it wasn't joy. It wasn't victory. It was something quieter, heavier. I hadn't won back my son. That bond was shattered. But I had won back my dignity, my name, my right to say, I will not be used. As we left the courtroom, Margaret turned to me. You did well today. I nodded, clutching my binder close. It wasn't easy. No, she said softly. But sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that prove who we are. And as I walked out into the sunlight, I knew this. I was no longer just a mother who had been deceived. I was a woman who had stood up, spoken out, and demanded the truth. I went home, pulled open the drawer where I kept my passport, and laid it on the table. Next to it, I placed a brochure I'd tucked away years ago. A trip to the coast, someplace warm, someplace far enough that no phone calls could reach me. I picked up the phone, not to plead or argue, but to book a ticket. The day of the flight, I carried only one suitcase. At the airport, I sat by the window watching the planes lift into the sky. When my turn came, I boarded slowly, settling into my seat. As the engines roared and the plane began to rise, I pressed my forehead to the cool glass. The city shrank below me. Streets, houses, even the courthouse where I had fought my battle. All of it drifted away, smaller and smaller, until it was nothing but patterns on the earth. For the first time in months, my chest loosened. I wasn't just leaving behind betrayal and heartbreak. I was stepping toward something lighter. Rest. Peace. Freedom. I whispered a prayer, not for him, not for reconciliation, but for myself. A prayer of gratitude that I had endured, that I had found the strength to fight, and that at last I was flying free. My dears, if in this story you saw yourselves, be sure to write about it in the comments. I would be very interested to read it. Thank you.